Hey guys, Kevin with Lowcountry Paver. I'm marketing director here with Steven, the VP of sales. We're here to talk about some pavers today.
All right, so as a manufacturer, we see the good, the bad, the ugly of all types of paver installations. There's a few mistakes to really avoid. And these are things that I preach when I go to the field and I talk to these new contractors, or I speak to guys that want to know and learn how to install pavers. It's like there's these key mistakes that they can really try to avoid that'll set them up for a great install and a successful business in the paver industry. And, you know, I see a lot of guys, primarily the first area of focus is they don't dig a deep enough base. So they're not preparing the base appropriately. And when you short end and don't dig out enough, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because ultimately, if you're not bringing in enough base, if you're not excavating enough and having enough space to bring in the appropriate amount of base, you're not going to be able to compact that appropriately. And then that system, the paver, patio, driveway, pool deck, whatever it is, it will ultimately fail. And you're going to get callbacks. And that's going to hurt your reputation down the road. For sure.
So what does that look like if the base isn't deep enough? Like how does that materialize?
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah. So if you're a homeowner or a contractor, you're let's say it's all depending on the type of job you're doing, right? So let's say you want to do a driveway. There's specifications for how much you should dig out that driveway and prepare the base appropriately according to that spec. And that's all information we can provide you as a manufacturer. We have those details, we have those specifications we can give you and make those recommendations to you. So, you know, you want to, on a patio, you need at least 4 inches of a crushed base and then 1 inch of bedding sand or a bedding layer, depending on the style of base you're preparing. And then you also have to take into account the 2 3/8 inch typical paver thickness, which is what we offer, right? So altogether, if you have 4 inches of your crush base, 1 inch of sand, 2 3/8 of a paver, you're 7-8 inches deep that you have to excavate in order to appropriately get that patio to a true grade. And so that's where I see the biggest mistake is the guys are not excavating enough, they're not bringing in enough base, and their grades oftentimes are off. You know, it's very important that you look at the fall of the yard and the fall of the patio itself, and you want to make sure the water is running away from the home, right? Like we don't want water in the house. Nobody wants water in the house. So you have to draw and run your lines appropriately so you know your grade throughout the whole project from end to end, from the house, from the high point to the low point. You want to make sure that you're grading appropriately.
So are we looking at if the base and the grading and all of that is done improperly, we're looking at pavers that are going to sink, they're going to fall out, they're just not going to stay in place, they're going to kind of fall apart. I hate seeing that. That's cringy.
You don't want waves in your patio, right? Nobody wants that. You want a nice flat patio, so when you put your furniture out there or you're hosting guests, no one's tripping over loose stones. So like that's all dependent on your compacted base. So you need to prepare your base appropriately, make sure it's the correct thickness. You're going to compact it. Use your bedding layer, make sure you grade it out and screed it out appropriately. You lay your pavers down and you should have a nice level base, and the pavers should be even. There should be no tripping hazard. There should be no undulation in the field of the pavers. You want your edges secured appropriately. Like you don't want them falling off. I've seen jobs where the edges weren't secured, the pavers are falling off. That's a tripping hazard. But it's also aesthetically, like it just doesn't look good.
It's just like so many other things. You gotta do the prep work.
That's right.
And the install will go in and just well. What other kind of issues do you see some people make when they're installing some pavers?
Yes. So a lot of it deals with the pattern too. So depending on the style of paver you choose, I mean, we have over a dozen different styles, right? And each one of those has a certain laying pattern you could do depending on the type of application, right? And also the style of paver utilizing. There's going to be different laying patterns. And what we run into a lot of the guys when they first start out,
just laying them in a straight line.
Exactly.
Nice.
They're going to do the easiest pattern they can, and what that typically is a running bomb pattern where they just lay it in a line, and then they don't run their lines appropriately. So you're going to have waves, and there's going to be curvature, and nobody wants a
little squiggly
lines, right? Like nobody wants that on a patio, right? So what I always coach guys to do, new contractors, people I'm meeting in the field that I haven't spoken to in the past, or, I really try and coach and talk to them about using the right patterns that break up those long lines.
Right.
It makes it easier on you as an installer, but it's also going to give you a better finished product.
It looks way better.
Yeah. I don't want squiggly lines on my patio. And when I go to a job site and I see those, their job's ruined in my eyes, right? And then there's there's driveways. When you do it on driveways, if you're running straight lines on a driveway, you're going to run into problems down the road, because as that car
separate,
as the car turns, you're pushing force and pushing the pavers away. So it's going to fail.
Even like a 10-foot line on a driveway where you have too many.
Just avoid it. Just don't do it.
Let's not do that.
Yeah. Do like a herringbone pattern, or, there's a number of modular patterns depending on the type of product. Again, we do a lot of 3-piece driveways. I love when they do a nice herringbone style on that and breaks up the lines consistently, and it's a much
get artistic with it.
Yeah, exactly. Much more finished product. So, overall too, when you're laying the pavers, what I've realized too is a lot of the newer guys, they just want to drop the paver and just keep going. So what I'm talking about is like when you're building the patio or the driveway, they just drop the paver in place. And what we coach and what everybody will tell you is to do the click and drop method, where actually click one paver against the next, and then you let it fall into place rather than just dropping. Because when you just drop it, it's going to displace the bedding layer underneath that. And then
you're going to have gaps.
You'll have gaps.
Yeah.
So then you'll have inconsistent sand when you go to infill it. And again, like, not only is it a structural nightmare, it just doesn't look good. Like, you can tell that it wasn't finished correctly.
Right.
Yeah. So those are the big mistakes I see. And that's during the installation process. Another thing too, on the back end, as an installer, like, you want to be selling maintenance packages too, right? Like, so, or at least offer it. And what I mean by maintenance is the finished result. Like, always use a sand, and I always recommend a polymeric sand, but I see guys mess it up with the polymeric sand. You're going to keep ants, weeds at bay. It's a nice finished product. There's different color options. So design wise, there's much more flexibility, right? But not only that,
so don't use like sandbox play sand?
No, definitely not recommended.
That doesn't work for this purpose at all?
So we always recommend, unless it's a permeable install, right? Then it's a different product altogether. But absolutely a polymeric style sand. It's going to lock the joint in tightly. It really adds structure, but it also, again, inhibits weeds. It looks better. The biggest mistake I see guys do is they sweep too much sand into the joint and they overfill the joints. So then it almost looks like grout lines. Like, it looks like you mortared the pavers together.
Before.
It's
and
not
then
supposed
grass
to
just
look like
grows
that.
in it.
Yeah, it's not supposed to look like that. So they overfill the joints, and then they don't blow it off appropriately. So you have to make sure that you're blowing all the excess off before you activate it. Otherwise, it's going to feel like sandpaper. So you're going to have you'll have this poly sand stuck to the surface of the paver, and that's very hard to get off. You have to power wash it. You've got to get some hot water, scrub it as hard as you can, and
even just replace that piece.
And we've seen people have to do that depending on the type of polymeric sand they use. Again, because some are Portland based, and that Portland is not going to come off.
Right.
So,
right. Tell me about this this job we have going on right up the road here, about a mile away.
Yeah. So right now we're in Summerville, South Carolina. We have a project right now that we're working closely with an architect on. It's actually his personal residence. He designed a driveway using our hydroplank product. It's a 4x13, 110 millimeter linear plank style permeable product. In coastal communities like the Charleston area, Hilton Head, Savannah, Brunswick, St. Simons, Jacksonville, Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, all along the coast, we're seeing a huge push in emphasis on permeable pavers.
Right.
A number of municipalities are requiring these types of products on new constructions and even remodels, right? So, and the reasoning behind that is, I mean, you're familiar with Charleston. It floods all the time, right?
All the time.
All the time. So the infrastructure is not equipped to handle all this development. There's nowhere for the water to go. And especially if we get a king tide, the streets are going to flood.
Yep.
So
yeah, like last night. I mean, I was out on the water last night. The tide was probably 2 feet higher than it should have been.
Yeah.
And God forbid it rains during that time. And you got about 3 feet of water on King Street.
Yeah. Don't ever leave your car down there. That's for sure, because you're going to be in trouble. But yeah, I mean, so the whole idea behind permeable pavers and the benefit is you're giving a place where this rainwater can go. When you're building a house, you're reducing the pervious surface that's already on site, right? Like you're taking a barren site, which was dirt and grass, which is a natural setting where the water can penetrate and permeate right into the
potentially not flood in Charleston.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's going to go through the soil. It'll join the water table and go through the natural water cycle. Well, now you build a 2,000, 3,000 square foot house, all that water is running off. So what the municipalities are requiring is you have to have a certain percentage of impervious to pervious coverage. Well, the benefit of permeable pavers from a developer, an owner, and a contractor standpoint is you can allow your customer to have more usable space. They can build a bigger house. If you're a developer, you can add another condo. You can add another vertical building.
Carriage house.
Yeah, carriage house, exactly. Yeah. If you offset that building with permeable pavers. And now you have a place where you can park. We see people park their cars, golf carts, boats. They do it. As long as that area is built to spec and to code, like the water is going to drain. Now the rainwater that's coming off your house, coming from the yard and the streets, like that has somewhere to go. It's stored underneath. It can go through the cycle again.
And it does look, it
looks amazing.
Those driveways look amazing. That one we did in Hilton Head, right by the beach.
Yeah.
That one's one of my favorite color combos, that Charleston Pearl and the battery gray.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it works perfect in those environments because the soils are already sandy. So they already drain well. But when you would typically bring in and run a concrete driveway, now all that water's going nowhere. That's an impervious surface, meaning the water can't get underneath. We bring in a permeable paver. Now it goes
straight back to the ocean.
That's right. Well, it drains appropriately. It does what it's supposed to do naturally. Yeah. So that's the big reason behind permeable pavers, and one of the biggest benefits I see, and why I think coastal communities, you'll see it more and more and more. Yeah. And this job in particular, it was just that. He's building a new home, and he was required to use permeable pavers. And from a style standpoint, our hydroplink is a much more modern look. And that's what he was trying to capture.
I'm very excited to see the final result on that, because the home looked very interesting, a completely different style than what we typically see in this area. We see a lot of that coastal style. So
very much not a low country style home. Yeah. It's beautiful, very modern, clean lines, darker in color. Beautiful. And we actually have two distinct driveways going in on that site, because he has his personal residence and he's got another house on site too. So we're using our hydro shed on one portion, which is our standard 4x8. And then on his primary driveway, which is where he'll drive up, that's our hydroplank again.
Hydroplank.
Yeah. So
it's gonna look great.
It'll look fabulous. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks again, guys, for joining us. I'm Kevin, marketing director with Lowcountry Paver, and we have Steven here, the VP of sales for Lowcountry Paver. Make sure to follow us on socials and stay up to date with everything we have going on, all the content we have coming out, all our job sites. Anything that you want to learn about pavers, feel free to contact us. You can find us at lcpaver.com. So I appreciate it, guys. See you next time.